Hey everyone, I'm Hespera. Thanks for checking in. This is a full breakdown of the series You. So major spoilers for all 5 seasons ahead. I'll be going beat by beat through every season, analysing Joe's character progression throughout, exploring every love interest, ranking, and more. This is a big project for me and it's one of my first uploads, so I hope you enjoy. There will also be timestamps in the description if you'd like to look through anything. Today I'm going to be playing Minecraft in the background, putting up some stills and clips of the show as we go through it. Unfortunately, I don't want to be copyrighted. As always, this is all my personal opinion and interpretation, so take this as me throwing in my 2 cents. Now, without further ado, feel free to grab some snacks and let's dig in. Season 1. Hello, you, Joe opens. We're introduced to Joe Goldberg inside Mooney's bookstore, where he has a meet-cute with Beck. This season is set in New York and it's my favorite setting. The warm coloring and high buildings above make the scenery feel intimate. We listen to Joe's quirky inner monologue that's pervy and pretentious, but intriguing and funny too. He speaks in second person about Beck, making his obsession immediately apparent. After the meet cute with Beck, Joe searches through her social media to learn and infer all he can about her, blindly believing all of his assumptions. Day 1, he's already found her address and is watching her through her street-level curtainless windows. Beck's a broke poetry student who loves to write, but she's been having trouble sitting down and getting to it. By following Beck around, Joe informally meets Beck's obnoxious, superficial friends. Each of them are rude, but their leader, Peach, is the worst. Not only that, but Beck is in a situationship with the wealthy loser, Benji, who doesn't actually love her. Beck seems to naturally attract those who will take advantage of her, but surely that logic doesn't apply to Joe. He sees all of her flaws and wants to fix her life, make the perfect space for her to grow. Joe proceeds to break into Beck's apartment and invades her privacy in every way possible, quickly hiding in the shower when she returns home. He romanticizes his actions, believing that he is the stuff of rom-coms and that any woman would be charmed by this in a movie. He continues to follow her passively, never speaking to her or making himself known until she drunkenly falls into the train tracks. Joe hesitates, annoyed that nobody else is here to save her, but he jumps in when there's no other option. This begs the question, when would Joe have interacted with her if this hadn't had happened? They share a taxi ride to Beck's home, where Beck says she recognizes him from the bookstore, and they share a cute conversation before Benji brings her inside. Joe secretly stole Beck's phone from this encounter, logged into her cloud to spy on all of her messages going forward. Joe comes back to his own apartment and sees Paco, a nice, neglected kid who loves to read. His addict mother is in an abusive relationship with Ron, who is a cop of all things. Joe gives Paco his sandwich, books, and small safety when he can. It shows a kinder side to his character. He takes Paco to Mooney's and shows him a massive glass cage inside the basement. It's temperature controlled, locks from the outside, and is a small clear compartment that you can trade goods from outside to inside. Joe explains that the cage is for handling sensitive old books, but we learned that Mooney had kept him inside the cage when he was a child. I'll explain Joe's childhood here to wrap up the review a little cleaner. Joe grew up with his single mother and no stable home. She continually dated abusive men and often left him alone in dangerous situations where he was physically abused too. It continued like this until Joe found a gun and killed one of her boyfriends at the time. His mother, though, she called him a good kid and emphasized and reassured him that he did this to protect her. Shortly after, his mother abandoned him to foster care and went on to make a new family without him. Joe was eventually taken in by Mooney, the owner of the bookstore. Mooney taught him about books and sometimes trapped him in the cage, telling him he's doing it because he loves him. From being left inside, Joe learned the importance of hiding a secret key to escape. Back to the present. Joe lures Benji into the basement of Mooney's under a false persona and hits him with his trusty mallet, trapping him inside the cage. Benji is alive but suffering and goes on to recognize him and taunt him about Beck simply not being worth all this effort. Later on, Joe kills him by his peanut allergy, he takes out Benji's teeth so he won't be identified, and burns his body in the woods. Like any romantic would do. Beck struggles deeply with father issues. She lies to people and says her father died by an overdose, but really he's a deadbeat who started a new family instead. From this strained relationship and upbringing, Beck deeply struggles with insecurity and validation issues that suit Joe's desire to be her knight in shining armor. Beck describes Joe as a maybe via text to her friends, which infuriates him because he just killed for her. During this time, she's still casually sleeping with other men as well. When she breaks her bed with one of these hookups, she literally makes it a furniture date with Joe, really stepping into the relationship with loyalty. I'm sure that's not foreshadowing. Later, she takes him to a party where he meets Peach. Peach instantly clocks him, passive-aggressively insinuating that he is stalking Beck. Crazy sees crazy. Peach and Joe feud back and forth during his relationship with Beck, Peach constantly interrupting them until Joe has had enough and throws a heavy rock at her during her morning run. Except Peach survives and uses it as an opportunity to take Beck away on a weekend escape to her family estate. He follows them, of course, and learns that Peach is also stalking Beck, having hundreds of secret and inappropriate photos of her saved. He ends up killing Peach after a struggle and frames it as her ending her own life. Except, he forgot a mug of pee that he had stupidly left due to a head injury. Beck struggles in her grief surrounding Peach, sadly comparing her to an old sentimental blanket that she was relieved to eventually lose as a child. A month after Peach's funeral, Joe and Beck are the closest they've ever been. They make pancakes together and play cute games of Scrabble. But Beck starts to fall apart from grief, getting suspicious texts, and starts therapy with Dr. Nikki. This distresses Joe because he wants to be the only person that Beck would need. He follows her to one of these appointments and she catches him. He asks her if she's cheating on him and she says, "If we don't have trust, we have nothing," and breaks up with him. Beck completely gaslights Joe here though, as we'll later learn that she was cheating on him this whole time with her married with children therapist. Joe decides that maybe he's not what Beck needs, and lets her go. He destroys the stolen phone and tries to move on. 3 months later, Joe is dating Karen, who's wonderful. Karen's a nurse who treats Parker's mother out of kindness. She's nice, strong, and healthy. But Joe finds her boring because she doesn't need him like how Beck needs him. And she isn't pretentious with her tastes, unlike both of them. Joe and Karen naturally run into Beck by a food stand, and their feelings reignite for each other. Joe out of obsession that never truly went silent, and Beck because she feels jealous seeing Joe happy with another woman, like the homewrecker she is. She even goes on to make fun of Karen alone with Joe for no reason. They're so mean. Joe suddenly breaks up with Karen, but she doesn't ask any questions or fuss. She simply packs her things and leaves like the responsible, self-respecting woman that she is. On her way out, she warns Beck that she feels like he's hiding something about Candace, and that he might be dangerous. But Beck goes back to Joe all the same in a big romantic scene. Joe's been thinking about his missing dead ex-girlfriend Candace, and he yells out her name in his sleep, making Beck suspicious. Beck does some small investigating of her own and confronts Joe, but he explains away that Candace is in Paris and shows her photoshopped pictures. This ends up bringing them closer together, because Beck is ashamed that she doubted him. Through Dr. Nikki that Joe's been seeing under a fake persona, he realizes that Beck has been cheating on him. Joe confronts her with angry, desperate tears, and Beck admits to it. But she turns it around and says she's never loved anyone the way she loves him, and she didn't know how to handle all of that love. Instead of laughing in her face, this speaks to Joe's heart, and they gleefully continue dating. Parker comes by and makes an offhand comment to Beck that Joe likes to hide things in the ceiling above the toilet. Beck finds this endearing and decides to take a look. Unfortunately though, she finds the box. It's a small box full of missing phones, Beck's stolen belongings, evidence of Joe's crimes, and Benji's teeth. Horrified, she quickly tries to leave, but Joe reads the fear all over her and knocks her out. Beck wakes up in the cage. Joe explains like the depraved madman that he is that he stole from her and killed Benji and Peach for her because he loves her and wants to fix her life. When Beck doesn't accept this with gratitude, Joe is genuinely shocked. Later, when Beck falls asleep, Joe sets up a typewriter for her and a desk. When she wakes, he explains that this is the perfect writing retreat that she's been dreaming about and that it's time to write. Meanwhile, Joe has killed Parker's stepfather, Ron, and Parker is sincerely grateful for it. I'm sure this won't massively impact Parker's mental health and morality for the rest of his life. He'll be fine. Beck tries to romance Joe to let her out, but it either backfires or she breaks down. I'm going to take a moment to read sections of Bluebeard's Castle by Beck that she ends up writing. You used to wrap yourself in fairy tales like a blanket, but it was the cold you loved. Sharp shivers as you uncovered the corpses of Bluebeard's wives. Sweeter goosebumps as Prince Charming slid one glass slipper over your little toes. A perfect fit. But by the schoolyard, real princesses floated by you on full winds. You saw the gulf between you and the rich girls, and you vowed to stop believing in fairy tales, but the stories were in you. Deep as poison. And then, right when you thought you might disappear, he saw you. And you knew somewhere deep it was too good to be true. But you let yourself be swept because he was the first strong enough to lift you. Now, in his castle, you understand Prince Charming and Bluebeard are the same man, and you don't get a happy ending unless you love both of him. Didn't you want this? To be loved? Didn't you want him to crown you? Didn't you ask for it? Say you can live like this. Say you love him. Say thank you. Say anything but the truth. I found this poem and performance sincerely moving. It speaks to the darkness inside Beck, and I admire her writing style. To note for the future, I noted this poem relates closely to Louise's experience with Joe too. Beck gives Joe an out and writes about her affair with Dr. Nikki that incriminates him instead of Joe. Then she manages to woo Joe out of the cage, gripping a piece of the typewriter behind her that she stabs him with. Beck quickly locks him inside and screams at him that he is delusional and no one will ever love him, before running up the stairs to escape. The door's locked, but Paco notices her screams. Beck begs Paco to open the door and tells him that Joe is crazy and keeping her down here. Paco, loyal to Joe, chooses to walk away. Beck scrambles back to get the keys. Joe is out of the cage and she smacks him with his mallet. If only she had had the guts to finish the job. Beck gets the keys, but there's too many of them, and she struggles to find the proper one before Joe creeps up behind her and strangles her to death. 4 months later, Joe has published Beck's manuscript, and Dr. Nikki has been framed for her murder. Joe reminisces that he couldn't save Beck from herself in the end. The season ends on a cliffhanger when Candace, clear as day, walks inside. Notes about Season 1. Alright, let's chat about it. Season 1 is nostalgic to me. I watched it when it first came to Netflix over 7 years ago. It's one of my favorite seasons because it's the most grounded in reality. Joe, being a humble bookstore clerk, made him a normal man. He could be anyone you know in real life. It suits the show's safety messaging and themes best. Him being seemingly normal is a huge part of what makes him scary. Beck having an open public profile and curtainless windows reminds the audience to be safe and careful with who you let into your life. In later seasons, the show forgets this aspect, instead focusing on putting Joe's interesting character in dramatic situations to see what he will do. When Joe is no longer the only crazy one in the room, it's clear that the plot is moving on from exploring stalkers in everyday life. Joe is incredibly creepy as we're alone with him, watching him zone out in deep thought and smirk. I've seen a clip where Penn Bagley explains that people may find him scary because he's acting normal in uncomfortable and inappropriate situations. It's a shame that Joe is mainly surrounded by people after this point, often wearing his people mask. Here, he is incredibly lonely and doesn't do much besides read and stalk, so it adds to the suspense because he is so focused on Beck without many or any distractions. Speaking of Penn Bagley, his performance is captivating and his range is superb. Joe is charismatic, disgusting, smug, needy, rageful, filled with love and delusion. His sparkling puppy dog eyes with Beck in the cage versus his twitching wrath, it elevates Joe's character substantially. Almost all of season 1 is about Beck, making us invested in her character, her internal struggles, her friends, and of course what Joe was doing about her. The lack of subplots and side characters that don't specifically relate to Beck forces the audience into stalking her as well. This is my favorite approach because it makes their relationship the main aspect of the story. Beck is objectively an awful girlfriend. She cheats, lies, is mean, all the like, but at the end of the day, I like her. She's flawed on purpose. Elizabeth Lail's warm performance makes her so much more likable. Beck's personal struggles with writing, her father, and her insecurities made her realistic, relatable, and compelling. I was rooting for her to grow and devastated when she passed. Her scenes inside the cage were some of the best in the show, tearing Joe's heart apart and seeing him exactly for the monster he is. She was the perfect first love interest for Joe, fitting like a missing piece into his broken mentalities. Beck felt like she needed someone to save her, and Joe needs to be needed. Joe's reception by the audience was a huge talk of interest at the time. The first-person point of view is a brilliant signature aspect of the show, forcing the audience to instinctually root for him because our natural self-preservation instincts. If Joe is about to be caught, we're automatically searching for a way for him to escape, not because he's a good guy, but because we're in his head. The narration is also a fun quality. Giving us access to his thoughts transforms the scene into something much more sinister or funny than what it appears. I really admire these techniques. It makes Joe such an entertaining protagonist and the viewing experience inherently intriguing as we battle our initial reactions. I'm going to touch on the first 2 books now. There's a timestamp on screen if you'd like to skip this bit. I read the first 2 books back in 2020, I think, and I am not planning on rereading them. Unlike the series, the first-person perspective made Joe insufferable in the books. I am grateful they changed him up with humor and charisma because, wow, he was gross. Somehow he was more perverted, pretentious, entitled, whiny, and depraved without the snarky humor, romantic scenes, and positive friendships like Paco. I found myself glaring down at the pages constantly, simply irritated by his presence. There is no instinctual rooting for Joe in the books. I was preying on his downfall. Beck was different in the books too. I much rather her in the show. I like the chapters where they were engrossed in each other though. I remember her saying when Joe talks to her, she tries her hardest to pay deep attention to him, but she can't help but zone out in awe of him. It's the most she's ever tried to listen and fail in her life. In the end, when she escapes the cage, she sits on Joe's lap and talks sadly about her life before he strangles her still. Afterwards, in book 2, Joe rudely brings her up saying, "R.I.P. Beck, I couldn't save you from BPD." She never even has an official diagnosis, he's just being ridiculous. In the moments after Joe strangles Beck, he realizes with horror what he's done, grieving that he'll never see her again as he buries her. But once he compartmentalizes this, skippity-doo-ha, who cares about Beck? At least in the show, he offers some guilt and is haunted by her throughout the series. I don't mind the books overall, but the show definitely improved the material. Especially book 2, because I barely got through reading it. Speaking of, let's explore season 2. Over chips and a thick shake, Candace says to Joe that she's not going to the police. She's not going to kill him. That would be letting him off too easy. No. She's going to destroy his life. This is as good a time as any to say I do not like Candace's plan and she pisses me off. But I will hold back for now. In response to this threat, Joe runs from New York to a place she would never expect of him, LA. Joe, pretentious as always, hates everything about LA and can't stop talking about it. He kidnaps and takes the identity of Will Bettelheim, a sketchy hacker who illegally makes identities. Joe comically took the massive glass cage from Mooney's with him and plopped it into a storage unit where he now keeps Will. Joe swears to quit relationships for the meantime because he doesn't like doing bad things and what that possibly makes him. Except he immediately fails his mission and falls for love Quinn. He rents an apartment that can see Love's balcony, gets a job at her place of work, and stalks her, of course. Except in his mind, he's keeping it on the down low in controlled bursts. The landlord of his apartment is Delilah, who's sassy, hardworking, and a little annoying. But they form an unlikely friendship and eventually hook up with no strings attached later. It's important to note, though, that Delilah initially dislikes him and finds him creepy, seeing the evil man she's met in him. Delilah's younger teenage sister Ellie becomes Joe's new Parker. But let's just say Ellie doesn't end the season grateful for his impact on her life. Joe and Love start dating and they flirt about food a lot. Objectively, too much. Joe is amazed at how different she is from Beck. Love initiates, she's strong-willed, stubborn, values family, is deeply caring, and a dedicated chef who loves her work. They have a cute date around LA, eating different foods, with Love eventually cooking for him, making him a classic roast chicken, saying it suits him. In a miscommunication, Joe believes Love is married, but he finds out she's actually a widow. In this scene, Love tells him that she sees loss in his eyes too, making him feel seen. Will owed a gangster 50 grand and he chops off Joe's pinky finger. A side quest later, Joe kills this gangster, reattaches his pinky, and minces the guy in his work's kitchen. How is this practical? How is this proving that you don't enjoy killing? Luckily for us, Will is a welcome addition to the cast. He's funny, kind-hearted, and rather delusional for becoming a real friend to Joe. Love moves fast and introduces Joe to her friends in a small surprise. Unlike Beck yet again, her friendships are healthy and they all deeply care about each other. Love catches Joe in a white lie during this and confronts him later. He raises his voice at her when he sees a hallucination of Beck, and Love rightfully tells him she's not okay with him yelling at her and leaves. 40, another stupid name, is Love's twin brother. Joe tries to be friends with him to be closer with her, but 40 agitates him like a mosquito near your ear when you're trying to go to bed. Their parents named them 40 Love after tennis. In 40 Love, the score Love means nothing, sadly symbolizing how 40 is coddled and Love is treated awfully by their mother Dottie. 40 interrupts their relationship like Peach, and he's weirdly codependent on his sister who fiercely protects him. Several times, Joe thinks it would be easier to kill 40, but he pushes it down because it would make Love sad, and he's not a murderer. But he does accidentally kill Henderson. Henderson is a comedian celebrity who drugged, photographed, and sexually assaulted Delilah, about to do the same to Ellie. Joe had tied him up in Henderson's gross basement, trying to make him confess, but Henderson easily taunted him, and Joe ripped off his mask to yell, "I'm nothing like you." Then Henderson tried to run away, but smacked his head on the wall, falling down the stairs. Joe frames this as him ending his own life, but the police later rule it a murder, looking for the killer. Will helped Joe in this, and Joe decides to let him go with no strings attached, trying to prove that he is a better person. Surprisingly, Will doesn't turn him in, and they even stay in contact as buddies. Love invites Joe to a wellness weekend with her family, where 40 introduces them to his new girlfriend, Candace. Joe is obviously scared and pissed and makes subtle digs at her, while Love is cautious and wary like a hawk. Later on, Joe calls Candace's bluff that she has nothing on him, and the color drains from her face. Candace points her knife at him, and Joe is flabbergasted that she thinks that he would hurt her here. He tells her that he is a changed man, and to leave him alone or finish the job right now. She can't do it, and we get a flashback from her perspective. Candace was incredibly mean to Joe during their relationship and breakup. She was proudly cheating on him and calls him a loser, basically. Naturally, Joe ties her up, kidnaps her, and takes her to the woods at night for a picnic date to revive their love. Candace tries to run away, but Joe thumps her head on the ground. Thinking he's killed her, he covers her with leaves and runs away. But Candace survives. She goes to the police immediately, but the policewoman tells her that it's likely her case would go nowhere because it's her word versus his, even with the dirt under her fingernails and head wound. The policewoman personally gives her the advice to pretend that she is dead and to run away, which is what Candace does. But then she reads Beck's memoir and realizes Joe has done it again. Hence why she's here, trying to protect Love and the Quinn family from Joe in her haphazard plan. I don't understand why Candace lied to and used 40, pretending to be this dumb bombshell. Why didn't she just approach Love and 40 genuinely, giving them all the evidence she had and promising she's telling the truth? It doesn't make much sense. Anyway, 40 invites Joe to write in his new project. He's making a film adaptation of Beck's memoir by the recommendation of Candace. Joe has had enough and decides to get rid of her before she ruins his relationship. But Love is already tailing Candace with her private investigator after she caught her in an obvious lie. Joe is concerned by this and asks Love if she'd ever use a PI on him. Love is offended that he would dislike her protecting her family and demands if she should hire one. Later, Love catches Candace breaking into Joe's apartment and learns that he isn't actually named Will. Joe explains away that he only changed his name because Candace is crazy, but Love ends the relationship. Joe is devastated and preparing to leave LA when 40 throws him a bone and says Love will probably come around if you give her time. Love is rebounding with her ex Milo, who's the best friend of her dead husband. Ew! Milo had gotten with Love after he died as well. What a great friend and loyal wife! 40 hates Milo, so he's Team Joe, vouching for him in his corner. Joe tries to rebound too, going on a dating app but disliking every woman. Probably because they're actually consenting and aren't followed beforehand. But he does hook up with Delilah, a relationship actually untainted by stalking. However, Delilah finds the keys to Joe's storage unit and leaves to check it out. She's been suspicious of him since her cop boyfriend saw him the night Henderson died. Delilah is shocked by the cage and is photographing evidence when Joe comes back. He sighs. He was going to ask if she wanted dinner tonight and locks her inside the cage. He promises that he's going to leave the state and she's going to be okay, for Ellie's sake. He starts making arrangements to flee the city and puts Delilah in time-release handcuffs set at his flight time. Devastated again, Joe writes a love letter goodbye to Love. He decides to write with 40 before he leaves, but they get kidnapped. But it's not a real kidnapping. 40 arranged it to make them be inspired and forced to write. Joe understandably crashes out and goes to leave, except they can't leave because 40 also hired security to shoot them. It's hilariously revealed later that there was actually a safe word in place this whole time. Also, Ellie's here as a little assistant for some reason. She critiques the work when they ask her opinion, and 40 jumps out the window in despair. Joe, gobsmacked, follows him to a bar. 40 offers $10,000 to a newlywed couple if he can kiss the bride. The groom rejects this, but the bride accepts and 40 crudely makes out with her. Not only this, but 40 roofies Joe with way too many tabs of acid. Joe proceeds to trip balls and lose time for the rest of the night, making up with Love, seeing visions of his mother, and blood all over his hands in a bathtub. Joe gets time back in the hotel with 40. 40 is making changes to his adaptation, plotting that Beck was actually killed by her boyfriend briefly mentioned. 40 acts out the scenes and Joe is tripping out, hearing and seeing Beck in his place. He's about to kill him until 40 admits that he only made this up because he himself is a murderer. 40 tells a story of him killing their childhood au pair, his first love. But he can't remember, assuming to have blacked out in rage. Dottie covers this up and he's been guilt-ridden ever since. Joe comforts him, offering hugs and words of support, relieved not to be caught. Joe later calls Love and has this grand revelation that he can stay and make everything right again. Somehow, don't ask me how he's gonna do it. The morning after this crazy trip, Joe returns to the storage unit to make sure Delilah's going to be freed from the handcuffs. She's about to be, but her throat has been cut and she's dead on the floor. Joe is saddened by this, but not as much as he should be. He's more incredulous that he wouldn't do this because this isn't who he is now. He spends the day trying to piece together his lost time. Meanwhile, Candace tells 40 the real story of Joe, and 40 goes to Dr. Nikki in prison to corroborate this. Dr. Nikki is terrified of Joe, but he doesn't speak up because he believes he deserves prison for cheating on his wife and ruining his family. Low-key. Candace manages to track down the storage unit as well, and finds Delilah dead inside. She pepper sprays Joe and traps him inside the cage. She texts Love to come and see the truth. Joe, shockingly, is repenting inside the cage, realizing this is what he deserves for the sake of the terrible things he's done in the name of love. He deserves to be locked up. Meeting up and seeing the scene inside, Love slashes Candace's neck and kills her, and reassures him, "I took care of it." Love confesses everything to Joe. She murdered 40's au pair abuser and framed 40 for it because she wanted to protect him. Love lured Joe to stalk her and welcomed his actions, believing that they'd build a family with unconditional love unlike her own. She's impressed by what he's done and who he is, and she murdered Delilah because she would have gotten in their way. Love's plan is to cruelly frame Ellie for Henderson's murder and set up Delilah to have ended her own life from the fallout. Joe utterly hates all of this, and his idea of love is shattered irreparably. Joe keeps the handcuffs in the back of his pants, and when Love opens the door, he strikes her against the glass. She screams that she's pregnant, and Joe's world collapses. From here on, Joe pretends to be fine with Love, but he's only here for the baby, who he hopes is a girl because he can't imagine raising a son right without screwing him up like himself. Joe gives money to Ellie and demands that she skips town before she's taken by Child Protective Services. Ellie realizes that Delilah must be dead and that Joe is responsible. Betrayed and sobbing, she snatches the money and leaves. Finally back, 40 rushes in to protect Love, holding Joe at gunpoint and explaining that he is a serial killer. Love begs him not to shoot, that Joe is her new family, but Delilah's cop boyfriend shoots 40 in defense. Love is destroyed by grief, but that doesn't stop her from coldly pinning the murders of Henderson and Delilah on him. Love and Joe move away to the suburbs to get a fresh start, give birth and raise their child together. Nevertheless, the closing scenes are of Joe getting a new infatuation with their neighbor. Notes about Season 2. I've got a lot of complicated thoughts and feelings about Season 2. I'll begin with the ending and work backwards. There's another timestamp on screen again if you'd like to skip this bit about Book 2. The book ends completely differently. Joe had told Love the truth himself, accepting that if she rejects him and puts him in jail, it's okay, she deserves better. But Love chooses to be with him and steals back his mug of pee as a romantic gesture. Love also isn't a killer. Instead, she was covering for 40's disgusting crimes that thankfully aren't in the show. Joe and Love end the book happily together. Joe is in jail, but there's no concrete evidence, and Love's planning his release. She's pregnant, they think with a girl, and he can't wait to reunite with her. Even though Joe deserves at minimum jail, but more like divine wrath against him, it feels rewarding because a goal is completed at the end. Unlike the show's ending. It infuriates me. I understand that it's necessary for Joe's character and the direction for him that the show decided, and I wouldn't actually change this plot beat, but that doesn't stop me from feeling like this was rushed and Joe just wasted my time with his nonsense. Here's how I think it should have played out to be more satisfying. Love and Joe are back together, but it feels like walking on ice. Joe isn't infatuated with her anymore, but Love is trying to make it work and is deluding herself that he just needs time, that things will be different once they have the baby. Love and Joe move to the suburbs and things appear more steady. But it's a facade and Joe is sitting on the fence, scared of seeing his inner demons in love, but still having feelings for her. The season ends hearing an unfamiliar woman's laughter or voice, the camera on Joe's face as he slightly bobs his head up with sudden attention. This ending would feel more open-ended, giving the narrative room to grow next season, while teasing that Joe may leave love for a shiny new girl to stalk. But they didn't do that. It ends having already answered these intriguing questions in the final minutes, destroying potential suspense. A big part of why season 2, and especially season 3, frustrate me is because I feel like they fumbled Love and Joe's changing relationship. It felt incredibly rushed and random for the sake of other plotlines and jumping forwards. Love goes from being Joe's self-assured, passionate girlfriend to suddenly matching his crimes. Instead of seeing her as his perfect match, Joe hates the reflection of his violence in her. In his mind, she was meant to be his pure damsel and the object of his affection. Her murders turn her into a monster like him, which is something he can barely admit to himself most of the time. It would be far more satisfying to explore this decay in their relationship over time. Hearing Joe's complicated inner monologue about her, perhaps some significant hope of salvaging it for the sake of their beloved child, only for Joe to rip Love's fantasy away from her and fall back into his infatuation with a fleshed out, likable character. But instead, the show makes it clear from the get-go that Joe thinks she's crazy now and that he's going to be a pervert. It's such a waste. There was way more potential here. Winding us back in, Love's character is fun and brings a lot to the series. I like how she is motherly and overprotective. You can especially see it in her relationship with 40 and how she guards him. She's obsessed with family and finding unconditional love, her generous nature present in many places of her life. Love is capable of standing up for herself too, harboring burning resentment as she realizes Joe isn't going to fulfill her needs next season. I liked the side characters and subplots overall. My critique is that it takes away a lot of time from Love and Joe's romance. It felt like they spent the majority of the season split up, with Joe running around all over the place, which takes away from the main goal of the narrative. I'm mainly thinking of Delilah's subplot when I say this, as Henderson doesn't clearly relate to Love and Joe's relationship, but I don't mind it. Moving on to season 3. Season 3 sucks! But I'm going to hold my rant back for now. Time to jump in head first. Joe is tapped out of his relationship with Love after finding out she's a murderer, but he's here for his son, Henry. Joe is a mess over his child being a boy. He was expecting a girl who he could protect, but now he has to raise a boy in his image, an image he doesn't trust or understand. Messing Henry up terrifies him. He also feels emotionally disconnected for a while because of the significant work of raising an infant. But he manages to bond over reading him Gatsby before nap time. Love gave Henry 40 as his middle name, and it frustrates Joe to have to keep hearing about him. So annoying to have to listen to your wife be sad about her dead twin brother. Am I right, fellas? You would think that Henry would be a massive part of the plot. This is a huge development in Joe's life. But for some reason, the showrunners almost completely ditch Henry. Joe immediately becomes infatuated with his boring neighbor Natalie, who invites him over for wine and complains about her marriage like a classy woman. She tells Joe that her husband tracks her while he's away and that she feels checked out of their relationship. They're about to hook up, but Joe's conscience surprisingly kicks in and he leaves to finally have intimacy with Love. Love quickly recognizes that he's obsessing over Natalie and even finds his new box about her. Ew. Jealousy consumes her, and she ends up impulsively murdering Natalie with an axe in the basement of her new bakery. A quick note, Love's friends, who are mainly ditched by the narrative now, gave an offhand comment earlier that Love only bakes when she's upset. Now, she owns a bakery. It is such a good detail. Love calls Joe in a panic, telling him what she's done, and he aggressively helps her dispose of the body. Her impulsivity disgusts him despite him sharing this trait. They bury Natalie's corpse in the woods with their baby beside them, and Love gets grossed out when Joe removes her teeth. Me too! This part Oh my god. Love starts a slow affair with a college student, Theo. And it gave me the creeps because he looks like a boy compared to her. He is like a boy compared to her. She's a fully grown married woman with a child and he is 19. And of course, Joe starts another affair with a librarian and illustrator Marion, who I found boring at the time. I was not interested in seeing this infatuation formula again. Joe realizes that Natalie was wearing a tracking ring, so they dig her up, dispose of the ring, and bury her in a construction site. Love blows up at Joe in the rain. Why don't you love me anymore? And I really like this scene. Love's descent into madness from his neglect was like anticipating a volcanic eruption. They're in couples therapy and talk about their issues under different guises, and they aren't clicking. But suddenly they are clicking, and Love opens up her bakery, Joe setting up his cage in its basement, of course. Love and Joe are spiraling with paranoia from Natalie's murder amid their gossiping neighbors. He's planning to frame Natalie's husband, Matthew, but he catches measles and starts hallucinating when breaking onto his property. Shockingly, Matthew swaddles Joe in blankets and is kind to him. Joe can't do this to a nice guy, so instead he gives him some advice on how to win back his public image over the scrutiny from Natalie's disappearance. Love gets measles too and realizes that she got it from her neighbor who doesn't care that it's being spread around, so she puts him in the cage. A side plot later, he dies and they frame him for Natalie's murder. 6 months later, Joe is obsessing over Marion. Him and Love still aren't clicking, and Love admits to her affair with Theo. Joe gets mad, which Theo overhears, and becomes concerned that he might be hurting Love. Joe decides he should get friends, so he goes on a bros camping trip with Carrie, a side character I haven't bothered bringing up. It's an ooga booga experience, where Joe accidentally almost kills him, but they become friends and bond. Meanwhile, Love and Theo are continuing their affair, and it's still grossing me out. Joe and Marion end up kissing, and he's full-blown stalking her. Love freaks out that she may be pregnant from Theo, but she's not, and she hallucinates 40, who comforts her in the tub. Love has been sorely missing her twin since his death, and it's a sad scene. Love decides to continue seeing Theo to spy on Matty, who is his father, and make sure they're not found out about Natalie, which Joe agrees to because he's secretly seeing Marion and doesn't care anymore. Dottie, Love's mother, steals Henry when babysitting and burns down her husband's vineyard for being upset at his affairs. This literally doesn't matter to the main plot though, and nothing comes of it. I think the showrunners simply just wanted a fire explosion scene. Love's frenemy Sherry, Carrie's wife, the names in the show are so funny, invites her and Joe to swing with them, and they stupidly agree. Love does it to hopefully get attention from Joe, which is a crazy idea, and Joe does it to purposely blow up their relationship so he can pursue Marion. Joe imagines Marion, Love notices and interrupts to talk downstairs. Love starts an unhinged screaming fight where she shouts that she killed Natalie for him. Sherry and Carrie hear this and try to make a run for it, but after a big struggle, they both get put in the cage. Sherry and Carrie try to charm their way out, but it fails and they're not doing so hot. It's funny though because they're ridiculous characters and I appreciate their plot here. Love diabolically gives them a gun and declares only one of them can live if they want to leave the cage. They end up both accidentally shooting each other. Marion is losing a custody battle for her daughter due to her struggles with addiction, and Joe comforts her. Then kills her ex-boyfriend by stabbing him in a parking lot, so boom, problem solved. Theo realizes Joe is Natalie's murderer through security footage and goes to warn Love, but then Theo walks into the basement and he sees Sherry and Carrie. They yell that Love killed Natalie. Theo is in shock and disbelief when Love clobbers him with a fire extinguisher. Marion finds out her ex-boyfriend's death and she wants to have a fresh start, leave town, the country. She tells Joe she loves him, asking if he'll come with her and her daughter. Joe happily agrees, but he has some stuff he has to do first. Theo's alive and Joe drops him at the hospital. Meanwhile, Love realizes Joe killed Marion's ex-boyfriend when she finds his bloody shirt. So she decides to make him dinner. Joe holds a knife under the table and asks for a divorce, to which Love reveals she killed her first husband by using a paralyzing poison, except it was an accident? Anyway, she's poisoning Joe for real, and he falls down, paralyzed. Matthew comes in, sees him on the floor, but Joe gestures with his eyes that Theo's at the hospital, so he leaves for his son. Marion shows up at the door, wanting to see Joe. Love confronts Marian about their affair with a knife tucked behind her back, going on to say that Joe killed her ex-boyfriend. Marian's daughter speaks up behind her and Love stammers. Heartbroken, she was about to kill a mother. Love warns her to leave before Joe gets her too, and they go. Love's about to kill Joe when he jolts out of paralysis. Having suspected she was planning on poisoning him, he'd taken adrenaline earlier in preparation. May I say, I was so pissed at this point, I was just waiting for Love to kill him. Joe poisons her with the lethal dose he had stored, and Love dies painfully on the floor, crying that they were perfect for each other. I mean, clearly not. Sherry and Carrie end up escaping the cage after realizing Love and Joe don't trust each other, so there must be a spare key. And they end up successfully escaping after almost dying. They go on to make TED Talks and a book about surviving this experience. Joe selfishly leaves Henry on the doorstep of Love's friends from season 2, who he thought would make good parents. He fakes his death as Love murdering him, chopping off and baking his pinky toe into a pie. Then he goes off to find Marian in Paris. Notes about season 3. Alright, season 3 had a lot of junk and an excessive amount of explicit scenes. Like, I am here to watch a story with characters and plot, not all of that. I'm just going to list off my thoughts to prevent rambling. Henry should have been the core of this season, or at least a major part of the plot and their character arcs. He is their firstborn son, and they did absolutely nothing with him. Love and Joe should have been alone more and have a slower paced progression, their time together filling up with suspense before they eventually snap at each other. Joe being flip-floppy with his feelings for Love got so irritating. We ended one episode with them finally in a good place, having reconnected as a couple, to open the next episode to Joe being completely done with their relationship. I closed my laptop when that happened. I cannot believe they did that. The side plots were messy, forced, and often meaningless. Sherry and Carrie were the only good side characters. They were really funny. I basically can't remember anyone else. The show completely drops Theo after this. He knows that Joe is the killer, but he is left as a loose thread. Love's character had so much potential that wasn't utilized. She should have had more interesting things to do and an actual chance with Joe. Natalie and Marian were very boring love interests compared to the murderer beside him. Forcing in a hello you plot in the middle of this mess, it was exhausting. Lastly, Joe leaving his son behind for Marian felt ridiculous, like the previous finale episode. So yeah, I wasn't impressed. Unlike season 4, now we are cooking. Season 4 could have been its own limited series. It is completely different from previous seasons and stands out on its own. The show steps into a new direction and I seriously appreciate it. Immediately, big upgrades in the aesthetic. The London setting, camera work, and intense coloring made the show that much more enjoyable. It all feels like a fresh take. The plot is huge, so for the sake of cutting down the script, I'll only be covering events that directly relate to Joe. A hitman shows up on Joe's door, hired by Love's father to kill him, but he expresses he's tired of his work and doesn't want to. They come to a deal. Joe kills Marian because she knows about his true identity, and the hitman will give him a new passport and life in London. Joe pretends to kill her, not being able to do it in the end, and leaves for London to start anew. We learn that he had followed Marian to Paris, where he chased her down to an abandoned building. She is terrified of him, and Joe lets her go to prove he's not crazy like she thinks he is. The whole sequence from Marian's perspective was horrifying. My only complaint is, why did she run from a crowded public space to an abandoned building? Anyway, Joe is now Jonathan Moore, working at a London university as a literary professor. He's friendly with one of his students, Nadia, who offers him a book by Reese Montrose, who's running for mayor. Joe talks with another professor, Malcolm. He calls him a douchebag, but they're friendly too. Malcolm had helped Joe get his job and flat apparently. He lives opposite Malcolm, and you can see his apartment through his window. This is where he spots Kate. Joe saves Kate from being robbed, and she treats him rather rudely for no reason. Malcolm thanks him and invites him out to drinks with their friends. The rich snobs in this group are awful. Besides Phoebe, I like her, she's a sweetheart for the most part. Joe tries to leave the party, but he's roofied by Phoebe, wow, right after I complimented her. So he starts losing time, barely remembering the night. He's Phoebe's new bestie though, supposedly having a life-changing conversation with her that he secretly doesn't remember. Joe wakes up and finds Malcolm dead on his kitchen table with missing fingers. He freaks out, but starts cleaning up all the same, chopping him up and dumping him in different places. He does it meticulously and rhythmically, although this is his hobby. It pretty much is. Invited to dinner with the rich group, Joe gets a message on an anonymous messaging app that they know what he did with Malcolm's body and that they're watching him. He comes home to news articles about him and his crimes all over his wall, continuing to receive anonymous threats. These messages demand that he should kill Kate because he loves killing. The messenger also sends Malcolm's missing finger to the police, who search for the dubbed Eat the Rich killer. Joe follows Kate around to make sure she's safe from the anonymous stalker. Their relationship in the beginning is mainly physical, with her glaring at him constantly. Kate is a rich businesswoman, but she's different because she built her success, though we'll later learn that she's actually the most privileged out of the friend group. Kate hates rudeness despite being rude herself, and despises mistreatment even though she surrounds herself with people who are cruel. In the group, Joe feels a close connection to Reese, the mayor book guy. They have deep one-on-one conversations. Some shenanigans later, Joe helps Kate hide a dead body that she swears she didn't kill. During this, she accuses him of being the Eat the Rich killer because he did far too good a job. To perhaps gain trust, Joe comes clean to her about Malcolm's death, explaining that someone's framing him and sending him anonymous texts. Opening up further, he tells Kate he was married once and had to leave his son behind, though he doesn't reveal any incriminating details. Also, you had to leave your son behind, Joe? Looks to me like you ditched him, but whatever you say. Joe gets pushed out of a window by Roald, one of the group who's obsessed with Kate, and then held at gunpoint by him too. Roald brings him to the others to expose him as the Eat the Rich killer, but they all laugh at him, and it becomes a matter of pointing fingers and throwing hands. Joe ends up attacking Roald and is surprised by Reese, who appears out of nowhere with a gun, knocking him out. Joe wakes up in a dungeon-like room and realizes Reese is the Eat the Rich killer who's been messaging him this whole time. Reese was inspired by Joe's ability to evade punishment for his crimes. He wants to pin everything on Rod, who's also tied up down here, but he asks Joe to kill him first, for the thrill of it. If not, he'll frame it all on Joe. Walking out, he kicks over a candle, setting the place on fire. Joe has been on a journey to become a better man, so he decides to help Roald, and they both escape the flames alive with the help of Kate. Back in London, Joe is wondering what to do about Reese when Kate arrives. She asks him out for drinks, a proper date, but Joe turns her down, saying he doesn't want to hurt her. Kate huffs and puffs, leaving in a fuss. Joe comes home to Reese inside, who explains that he's been killing people because they would ruin his image and mayoral campaign. He gives Joe another chance to find someone to pin all this on before he turns him in. Lucky for Joe, he happens upon the perfect target. Phoebe has a stalker, Dawn, who's been taking photos of them. She has Phoebe trapped in a room, but Joe comes in and saves the day, planting an ear in her backpack, successfully framing her. Joe comes home to Reese, who has one final task for him: killing Tom Lockwood, Kate's billionaire father. So, Joe decides to go on that date with Kate and secure a dinner with Tom. Tom, however, reveals that he knows exactly who Joe is. He manipulates Joe to find incriminating evidence against Reese to jeopardize the campaign in exchange for keeping Joe's secret. Naturally, Joe decides that this is his new plan. That way he can lock Reese up for being the Eat the Rich killer and get him off his back. He gets to work and sets up cameras around Reese's place, who quickly notices. Reese shows him Marian's passport and demands he kill Tom within 24 hours or he'll kill Marian. So Joe flips back on the plan and goes to kill Tom. In this encounter, Tom realizes Joe's trying to kill him. Instead of freaking out, he talks about Love Quinn's death, pleased how Joe's able to get away with murder. He continues to manipulate Joe to go kill Reese, who's alone staying at his ex-wife's house. So, Joe flips back again and goes to torture Reese, demanding he tells him where Marian is. But Reese claims he has no idea who she is, and he dies. Another Reese walks up and talks to Joe, telling him Marion is locked up in the cage, but where? Joe starts breaking down, questioning if he's hallucinating. Through flashbacks in Marion's perspective, it's revealed that Joe never let her go. He drugged her, trapped her in an apartment where he wasn't acting like himself. He's zoned out and detached. His eyes have no light as he continually listens to Reese's podcast. He eventually places her inside the cage, which is inside an abandoned building, bringing her food every day until one day he stops. Marion's episode was amazing. It was heartbreaking seeing her battle her addiction, starvation, and relationship with her daughter. All of it wrapped up in great acting, emotional cinematography, and welling music. Reese's illusion explains that Joe never met Reese until he killed him. All of the times they were talking were merely hallucinations, even the anonymous texts. Joe has been the real killer all along, wanting so badly to be rid of his violent ways that he convinced himself it was another man. After a long time, Joe finally finds Marion. She's starving, broken, and Joe is mortified. He apologizes and swears he'll get her out of here, but first he's gotta go do a side plot. While he's busy, Nadia, Joe's student who's been slowly investigating him, finds Marion, and they conduct a dangerous but brilliant plan for her escape. Joe leaves Marion outside, thinking she's dead, but really it was a medication temporarily stopping her heartbeat. Thankfully, she comes back to life, and it's such a cathartic moment. Joe's planning to leave the country and his crimes behind, but he's sad to leave Kate. They walk home together, and Joe says some sweet things before dropping her off and saying he'll call her. Kate's father Tom is waiting for her inside, asking if she'll inherit the business. Kate rejects this idea, and we learn that she has committed awful crimes, signing off on giving children cancer and causing so many wrongful deaths. Kate hates herself for this, hence why she's been trying to get away from her father and the business. Kate sees on the news that a side character who she's been angry at is dead. She asks Tom what he did, and he says he did as she asked. Kate argues she never asked for him to kill them, and Tom responds, "Then why did you bring it up?" He also reveals that everything Kate has built, all of her success that she has worked hard for, was orchestrated by him. Everything about her life is infected by her father. She's devastated, questioning everything she's ever known. Trying to rid himself of Reese, Joe takes tranquilizers, making himself pass out. But inside his dreams, he's haunted by those he's killed, ending the nightmare with Love, who's holding a gun to his head, saying somebody needs to die for this to end for good. Joe takes out a gun when he wakes, telling Reese he needs to end his life. Reese tells him that he doesn't want to die, he just wants to be seen, and they continue to quarrel. Kate tells Joe about her father and how she was planning on skipping town and breaking up with Joe over text, but she loves him. Plan to kill Tom commences, and he ends up killing Tom and security on the mission. Joe convinces himself that these are his last murders before he sets up the story of their deaths. Kate ends up inheriting the company in Tom's will after all. The next morning, Joe is standing on a bridge. Reese tells him not to jump, that everyone feels like a bad person and carries shame, that it's time to move on in life. But Joe tosses his phone into the water when Kate calls, and jumps. When he hits the water, he regrets it and wishes that he had spent more time with Kate. But he wakes up in hospital to find Reese isn't there. Kate is, and she expresses her anger, saying she wouldn't forgive him if he had died. Vulnerable, Joe tells Kate fragments of his past, that he's done horrible things. The show leaves this open-ended, assuming Joe had told her the whole truth. But he barely scratched the surface. Kate reveals her father's death and admits she knows Tom made Joe kill Reese. She opens up to him more, and they become a billionaire power couple. A while later, Joe kills Nadia's boyfriend and frames her for his murder, destroying her life for coming too close to the truth. Kate's taken over her father's business and through devious means returns Joe to his old identity. Not only that, but she takes Henry away from his new dads and now they have custody of him. Mooney's makes a return too. Joe monologues that he is a killer, but now he is honest with himself and it feels good. He turns to the window and sees Reese in his reflection. Notes about season 4. That was a big one, and I barely covered the plot. There was a lot of meat to the story. This season is great. You could watch this season on its own without the others, which I really appreciate. It was a fresh take. I found the mystery thriller plot fun, I was invested the whole time, and it was a great use of Joe's character. Putting him in the London setting, surrounded by a bunch of rich a-holes, gave him new things to do, exploring his personality and arc in a compelling way. Joe's denial arc this season was like a ticking time bomb and set up his future progression well. I like the focus being placed on his violent urges rather than stalking, exploring his darkness further without repeating plot lines. Calling back to earlier, I had noted in season 2 that the side plots and the other characters' perspectives took away from the overarching love story. This, however, is far different because season 4 isn't primarily a romance, it's a mystery thriller. The other characters and side plots directly contribute to the main goal of the story, thankfully. Kate is a mid-love interest though. I don't mind her in season 4 overall, but she isn't anything special in the romance category. I liked her personal plots with her father and her friends. She stood alone as a character well, but when it came to their romance, I wasn't yearning for them to get together. Marianne's scenes are some of my favorites in the show here. Being trapped with her was staggering. I love her character journey. There was such depth. Seeing her escape with the help of poor Nadia felt like a massive weight being lifted off my chest. Exceptional improvement from her introduction in season 3. She easily became one of my favorite characters. Season 4 and 5 really nailed Joe's victim characters, emphasizing the human desire to fight and survive. It's heartbreaking seeing what happens to Nadia and feeling the unjust wrath of him. This choice to focus on them is fantastic because it forces us out of Joe's delusional biased perspective and plunges us back into reality, vastly contrasting us instinctually rooting for him not to get caught in season 1. Basically, all of the new characters besides Nadia and Phoebe were dislikable, but they're supposed to be for the narrative, so it's not a fault. It makes Joe look better by comparison yet again, and it suits the whodunit story. I thought the twist with Reese was pretty decent, but it's a shame the show ditches this without proper explanation. Joe only brings it up afterwards in an offhand comment about how he was dissociating in London later on. So, chip chip cheerio, let's continue. Season 5. 3 years have passed, and Joe has returned to his home city, New York. Joe is a beloved philanthropist, socialite husband of businesswoman Kate. The public adores Joe for his romantic and supporting gestures to Kate, deeming him a dreamboat. Together they raise Henry as mom and dad. Speaking of, Henry's grown so much he's in school now. During the season, Kate juggles problems with the business, the board she works with, and her absolutely unhinged sisters. One of these issues is her uncle, who's threatening to expose her past crimes. She implies to Joe it would be helpful if he murdered him. So he does, reveling in the glory. Side note, how on earth did Joe lift this man, who is far bigger than him, up to the ceiling? Are you Hercules, Joe? Kate deeply regrets this and is disturbed by Joe, who feels empowered by it. Killing makes him feel alive and he accepts that now. He writes murder fantasies on his typewriter to contain and release these urges. When Kate finds the pages, he's frustrated that she doesn't appreciate what he's doing for her, that she doesn't accept him for who he is. Yeah, King? Kate's sisters Reagan and Maddie are both suspicious of Joe, not fooled by his nice guy act. Joe interjects himself into their lives during the story as he questionably tries to fix things and help Kate. Joe meets Bronte, who breaks into Mooney's, claiming she's been borrowing the books. She rambles about her literary passions and is clearly nervous. Joe, unimpressed, but intrigued like he is every woman, lets her go. He ends up hiring Bronte to work at Mooney's since she keeps returning and seems to love books. As they spend more time together, they flirt inappropriately, and Bronte nosily butts her head into his business every chance she gets, even finding his murder pages and critiquing them, assuming it's fiction. Oh, and he puts the cage back into the basement because why wouldn't he? Henry hits Reagan's daughter at school, breaking her nose because she said his mom's a killer. The headmistress makes Joe get riled up about his own violent childhood, perhaps affecting his son. Reagan, Kate's sister, is a deranged beast in the show and demands ridiculous things of them. Fed up with her cruelty, Henry bursts into their dinner and whips a butter knife at Reagan's head. Joe swiftly offers to kill Reagan, and Kate is appalled, saying she never wants to kill again. Joe feels offended by this, like his DNA has been criticized even more so. Bronte accidentally locks herself in the cage after snooping, and Joe got a notification because he has motion sensors now. Kate does too, and they use motion sensors and location checking during the season. Joe fires her but lets her out. He's struggling with his insecurity that the people he loves will never see or accept the dark, true parts of him, the parts of him that are necessary to keep them safe. He determines that despite Kate's refusal, it would be best to kill or at least kidnap Reagan, so he gets on that. But hilariously, he kidnaps the wrong twin! Joe ends up rehiring Bronte and offers her the apartment upstairs. Bronte initially refuses, not wanting to be fully dependent on him and trapped, but he reassures her, talks about his own trauma, and she agrees to stay. Joe offers Henry therapy after deliberating on it, pleasing Kate, but tensions are high and they continue to fight. Kate's coming to terms with the reality that she can't trust him anymore, and that he is in fact a dangerous man. Joe realizes she doesn't accept him and it makes him furious, dissipating his love for her. Joe confesses that he doesn't feel guilty for needing a purpose, for protecting his family. She is his queen and he her knight, all for Kate to recoil and give him the cold shoulder, her face an ice fortress. Joe continues getting to know Bronte. It's all rather flirtatious and physical, but they bond over trauma and their desires too. Bronte opens up about how much she liked Beck, and that it's a shame what happened to her. They bond over writing, and she offers that watching an abuser be punished is cathartic. Safe to say, Joe is enamored by this. Joe uses Maddie in the cage to get information, and after a big fight, manages to put Reagan in there too, where he plays Maddie's hand to kill her sister. The actress Anna Camp is phenomenal, by the way. The best side characters in the show. I'm not covering their stories to save time, but it is excellent. Kate breaks up with Joe, which barely bothers him. After all, he's got a new woman in his back pocket. She hires a PI to watch Joe and finds out about his affair. Heartbroken by everything she's learned and what's happened, she cries to her half-brother Teddy. Kate admits Joe has hurt people and worse. Teddy says, "Worse?" Now living in dire reality, she starts her escape plan to keep herself and everyone safe, including taking custody of Henry, who she loves. He's her son even if they don't share blood. Joe and Bronte continue their relationship, but Bronte pulls away and Joe wonders if he's come across too strong. Then she skips town, leaving her apartment stripped, her number disconnected, and Joe suspects her rude ex-boyfriend Clayton is behind it and that she is in danger. For the meantime, Joe goes home and reads a bedtime story to Henry. Moving the pillow, he finds a massive knife underneath. He freaks out at Kate about it and says that Henry could have gotten hurt. Kate accuses him of murdering Love and having an affair, shouting, "I gave you my heart." Joe replies that she took her heart back when she saw his. Then he says she's killed people too and to stop acting like a victim. He hands her the knife and says to kill him if she wants to. Joe just keeps offering for people to kill him. It happens at least 3 times. Kate refuses though, not stooping to his level, and instead plans for their divorce. Later, her sister Maddie confesses to killing Reagan while she was locked in the cage. Maddie's angry but grateful to Joe for this. Kate tells Teddy, who's furious that she won't go to the police. She isn't going at the moment because she's trying to cover for herself and her crimes. This makes Teddy look criminal by association, and he says that Kate might deserve to lose everything. Completely fair. Joe stalks Bronte with clues and a phone call, eventually finding her and breaking into the house. He tells her he's getting a divorce because he wants her now. Bronte admits she left because she was overwhelmed about being treated like a heroine in her own romance novel, and they hook up. They're later interrupted by her ex Clayton coming back, and Joe stops him from getting violent with Bronte. They start fighting and Joe ends up smacking his head on the ground, killing him. All of a sudden, Clayton's friends burst in, live streaming on their phones. Bronte backs up to stand beside them. Joe sits on the floor over a dead man for all of the world to see, betrayed by a woman again. We switched to Bronte's perspective and learned she was studying under Beck. She'd even heard Joe talking with her over the phone. She moved to New York to catfish him, having read Beck's memoir and noticing parts of it weren't written by her. Bronte is doing this with the help of a team: Clayton, Dr. Nikki's son, who isn't actually her ex, and 2 other women who cover crime on social media. Bronte's plan was to make Joe fall in love with her and then expose him for his crimes publicly and put him in jail. But she fell for Joe along the way and is battling herself internally of whether he's actually the bad guy they thought he was. Joe comes home to Kate trying to sort everything out. She blames Joe for Reagan's death and blames herself for taking Henry away from his first dads who loved him. She proudly pulled a fast one on him and tricked Joe into signing a temporary custody agreement while bailing him out. The document declares that he's unfit to be caring for Henry. Joe loses his temper and vows to get Henry back. Kate, like a badass, taunts him and says, "With what money?" He lunges at her before she warns him that there are armed guards waiting outside her door right now, and he'll only retain resources if he plays by her rules. She leaves to her bedroom and breaks down in private. These moments fill my heart with sympathy for her. Joe lurks outside Henry's school and manages to deliver a book they were reading with a tracker inside. Using the tracker, he breaks into a temporary apartment to see Henry. Teddy is inside and absolutely freaked out, grabbing a knife to protect himself. Joe fights and gets it when Henry walks down the stairs. Joe calls after Henry, desperate to be close to him, but is dragged away by security. Teddy later tells Kate he wants nothing to do with this and leaves. Bronte backs out of the plan with her team. She doesn't want to be the face of the operation anymore. Says it feels wrong. Her friend realizes in horror that Bronte fell in love with Joe and that she believes Joe killed Clayton in self-defense. This obviously ruins their friendship. The team makes a social media campaign against Joe, ending the video with "Pop off fam" like the professionals they are. Dottie stitches the video, accusing Joe of killing her precious twins, to which Sherry and Carrie stitch hers to say Love put them in the cage. Oh, and by the way, buy the book, link in bio. Parker stitches it too, praising Joe for saving him and his mother from a dangerous situation. The team then stitches Parker and speculates that Joe killed Ron and that he is protecting him. A bunch more we've seen in previous seasons stitch as well, bringing us full circle. It accumulates into an echo chamber of hate that leaves Joe livid. Bronte has also been criticized on social media, with men leaving threatening comments about her. She feels guilty for putting Joe through this, but she can't bring herself to message him. Joe gets advice and help from Maddie, booking an official interview to explain himself. She says, "You're a charming white man with great hair. Your work is mostly done for you." He has to admit to unspecific mistakes, apologize if he hurt anyone, tease childhood trauma, and most importantly, not cry. Don't want to give everyone the ick. Joe agrees to it for Henry's sake. Bronte watches the interview inside Mooney's from the street. He says that she is his biggest regret in life on air. Regretful, she books a one-way ticket and texts him before leaving. Joe gets the idiotic idea to show the cage, explaining it's for old books before he breaks down in tears about Mooney trapping him inside. Penn Badgley is superb in this role. They take a break from the interview and he sees the text from Bronte. "For what it's worth, I told the police the truth. You were protecting me." This is a revelation of love to Joe. The interview resumes and he talks about being in love with her, saying that he doesn't want pity. He wants people to know that he's the luckiest man alive to even have had a chance, even if it was snatched away. And with that, the social media opinion switches sides and people start swooning for him again. Bronte is followed and about to be abducted by one of these resentful men online, but Joe swoops in and plops him in the cage. She's been knocked out, so for good measure, Joe breaks her ankle to stop her from running away. Then he skips back to a hotel with her, handcuffing her to the bed. She wakes up to the smell of him cooking breakfast and he explains away that he handcuffed her to stop her from walking on her ankle, which Bronte somehow accepts. They relax and eat their breakfast, scrolling through social media and reading hot takes about each other. Joe admits he wanted to kill Clayton and can see that she wanted it too. Bronte eludes this and says she wants to be with him. He takes her down to the cage where her abductor is, and merrily offers she can do whatever she wants with him before leaving. He frames this as her taking her power back. Maddie's shenanigans happen, and Joe ties up her lover, not bothering to hide his annoyance. He duct tapes the guy to a chair and wants to kill him to get it over with, but Maddie begs him not to several times, trying to convince her lover to keep their secret. The whole encounter is so funny. The guy suddenly cares about being an honorable man who only speaks the truth. Maddie convinces him and they start making out, choosing their relationship and life. Joe sees this display of romance, something he craves so badly, and crashes out, massacring a chair with a knife in front of them before storming off. On his way out, he checks the video feed to see Bronte let the guy out, adding to his grievances as he's convinced she won't accept him either and she's not the one. Returning to Mooney's, he's surprised to find Bronte waiting. She explains that she let him go but threatened him and has his license in case he does anything. To prove her devotion to him, she puts herself in the cage and offers to answer questions truthfully. She admits she loves him, that he can't protect her from every bad guy out there, and it's enough for her that he wants to kill them. But he doesn't have to. Slowly, with caution, Joe swaps and is visually uncomfortable. Joe admits that he's never killed anyone innocent. Whatever you tell yourself, buddy. That he likes killing people and no longer feels bad about it. And he doesn't want Bronte to leave him like everyone else in his life. Joe asks to leave now, but Bronte stops to endearingly say he doesn't need to kill to earn love. Certainly not hers. She is Bronte and she sees him. Then she lets him go. Kate, Nadia, who is recently released from jail by Kate, and Marion team up. Phoebe's also here to help take care of Henry and is sober now. It's nice to have her bubbly presence around to cheer things up. She says to Kate that they'll swear off men and grow old in the countryside together. Henry lashes out at Kate, missing his dad and not understanding what's going on. He has a call with Joe over a game by the help of the hacker Will. They have a small chat before Joe argues with Kate and she hangs up. Kate has accepted that she needs to do everything she can to put Joe behind bars, even if it means being sentenced for her crimes and losing everything. She learns from a lawyer that the process will take years, even with all of their evidence. But to leave Joe dangerous and on the loose? She decides they need to kill Joe now and end this. Joe goes back on his word and frames Maddie's lover for Reagan's murder by planting teeth in his gym bag. But don't worry, he's only in prison for 1 day and somehow gets a prison tattoo. While he's out doing stuff anyways, Joe kills the guy Bronte set free because he can and it makes him feel good. After all, now he knows if he does kill a monster, she won't leave him. He can finally be himself. Teach a man how to fish and he'll say, but you'll accept nothing anyway, so why bother? As a romantic gesture, he goes to buy Bronte an Irish castle but realizes he has no money since Kate flushed his safety funds. They find that Mooney's is padlocked and evicted too. What do we do when we get mad, Joe? Plot to kill Kate, which is exactly what she wants him to do. He stalks her into a parking garage, creeping up on her before he realizes they're a decoy and he's injected with a sedative. Getting a taste of his own medicine, he wakes up inside the cage with the spare key removed and Bronte's newly bought engagement ring on the counter. Kate demands he either confess or dies, then leaves him to think on it. Bronte, sketchy as ever, breaks in upstairs to grab her stuff. Kate catches her but graciously gives her 10 minutes to pack. Better than me. Nadia comes into the basement and talks about how Joe ruined her life and her family. God, I feel so bad for her. Marion also pops in and Joe lights up at her being alive. He blames the London incident on his dissociating and cracking mental health, taking zero accountability. In fact, he says he helped Marion. After all, she stayed sober and got custody of her daughter again. This genuinely cracks me up. He is utterly delusional. Marion rightfully blows up at Joe, who is sitting there completely puzzled, baffled that she could possibly feel this way. Marion goes out and talks to Bronte, or should I finally say Louise. Bronte is the nickname she had been using to entrance Joe, but Louise is her real name. Bronte versus Louise becomes clever symbolism for Louise deciding between choosing herself or deluding herself in Joe. Marion asks which name she prefers, and Louise doesn't know, revealing she's questioning herself and Joe. Marion delivers a deeply emotional monologue to Louise, telling her to listen to the voice inside her head, saying it's too good to be true, that Joe isn't safe. Listen to what people are telling her, and it's not too late. Louise leaves, shaking, and calls her ex-team to say she messed up, but she's going to fix it. Nadia has had enough and wants to shoot Joe herself, and while the women debate, Joe unwraps his bandaged arm. He'd mentioned earlier to Bronte that it was from a bookbinding incident. This is diabolical. Joe uses his teeth to unbind the stitching and pulls out a spare key from his arm. Paranoia who? Kate decides she'll kill him herself and asks Marion to make sure Henry's okay. She agrees and they leave her to it. Meanwhile, Maddie sets Mooney's on fire for revenge against Joe, unaware that Kate is still inside. Kate and Joe 1v1. He shoots her in the stomach and bludgeons her with his trusty mallet. When the fire erupts, Kate smashes him back. Trapped and beaten, they bleed on the floor together in the flames. Realizing their fate, Joe admits he killed her father. Kate says she knows and he deserved it. She gets him to confess about love and a couple more things. She laughs, having recorded it all, sending it to Nadia for her to publish. In Joe's final moments, he's thinking about Bronte and if he deserves this. Miraculously, Louise ends up pulling Joe out of the fire and leaving Kate behind after Joe said it was self-defense. Then Joe proposes to her outside the burning Mooney's. It's you and me against the world. We swap to Louise's perspective, where she reveals she's going to stop Joe forever. Vampire by Olivia Rodrigo rises, the lyrics encapsulating the moment perfectly, and Louise says yes. The final episode head-hops between Joe and Louise, contrasting how different their realities are. Getting Louise's perspective for the final stretch was surprisingly the right move. Joe is incredible incredibly creepy and unnerving. His depravity crystal clear. They go on a road trip together to get away, planning their new life together as they go. Joe takes her to a cabin where they squat, Louise flinching when he kisses her, but she tries to play it off. Joe's getting them new passports named Ezra and Ella, to which Louise forces a small smile. They're both tense, so he takes her on a moonlight row on the lake. He lays on the bottom of the boat to look up at her. Bronte, framed by the stars, is the center of the universe. He is obviously a monster, but there are so many romantic elements. There are moments where I go, aww, then I remember. They head back to the cabin to hook up when Louise pulls out a gun from under the pillow and demands he tells her how he killed Beck. Joe, betrayed for the 100th time, blames Kate, Nadia, and Marion for poisoning his flower against him. Louise forces Joe to redact all of his contributions to Beck's memoir in a paperback she had brought with her. Once he finishes, he realizes she might not shoot, so he tries to swoon her, but then his phone rings. He picks it up and it's Henry, who's heartbroken after hearing that he hurt his mom. Henry tells him, "When you told me there were no monsters in my room, you lied. It's you. You're the monster." This is the breaking point. Joe has a mental breakdown. He is a monster. He is unlovable. He deserves this. His son deserves better. He's bawling on the floor, broken, until Joe snaps and he tackles Louise, overpowering her and shooting her in the side. This entire action sequence is thrilling to watch, best in the show. Louise escapes, but she realizes she needs her phone to call the police, and it's a whole scary ordeal. Watching Joe notice her in the window and start sprinting, it made my bones crawl. The cops end up coming and Joe kills an officer. He drowns her in the lake, but somehow she survives and limps back. Realizing he's about to be put in jail, he falls to his knees and begs Louise to kill him. But she refuses. Death is too easy a punishment. He lunges at her and is shot in the dick. In Louise's perspective, while Goodbye Yellow Brick Road plays, we find out Joe has been put behind bars for life without parole. Dr. Nikki is out of jail, Marion is living with her daughter, Nadia's a published author who teaches in prisons, Maddie and her husband are happy, and Kate managed to survive with burn scars, raising Henry as his mother. Kate also passes the company to Teddy, who makes it a non-profit. Louise has published a new version of Beck's book that redacts Joe's contributions, and people love it even more. She sees a vision of Beck smiling and signing books. Oh my heart! Louise is happy and says one day she'll remember all this as some guy she dated when she was young. It's all incredibly cathartic. Finally seeing everyone happy and free gave me such joy. Then we cut to Joe, lonely in prison with buzzed hair, complaining about how none of this is fair, that he is a product of his environment. He apathetically reads fan mail and ends the show saying, "Maybe the problem isn't me, it's you." Tying it all up full circle. Notes about season 5. I love season 5. This is peak Joe, utterly deranged and on the brink of collapse with frantic eyes and a quick temper. I think if this version of Joe met love, they'd have a much better chance. I'm so curious to see if he would have accepted her. Everything about him and Penn Bagley's performance was captivating, and I was nervous what he was going to do next the entire time. He was an utter train wreck and I couldn't look away. This season seriously leaned into the humor and it was brilliant. Everything was so absurd and Joe's selfless reactions to everything made me cackle. That man was a menace. He's at his boiling point and it makes the world around him be on the brink of collapse. Kate was far more likable this season too. I really enjoyed her character and sympathized with her dearly. The terrifying portrayal of realizing Joe is a madman after 3 years of marriage while raising Henry? Dear god. But she was strong and in the end responsible, bringing gravity to the situation, and I admire the way she stands her ground and flawlessly presents herself before Joe. Marion and Nadia continued to be great this season. Nadia's story was heartbreaking and seeing her rage stirred my own. Marion spitting at Joe that she will never feel safe again and always paranoid about her daughter, it was heavy. I am so glad both of them survived. I feel confident in saying Maddie and Reagan were the greatest side characters of the show. Reagan was a monster and Maddie was the perfect ditzy victim. The actress was amazing and they were an awesome add-on to the experience. Hey look! The show decided to do something with Henry! I was just glad to see him included and watch his and Joe's dynamic. Seeing him with Kate was adorable as well. I'd have liked to see a little bit more, but I appreciate the scenes we finally have. Louise was great too. She was obviously flawed, but in a gripping manner. Watching her try to find herself and reality while being love-bombed and deluded was nerve-wracking. Her chattiness and sketchiness was a little annoying at first, but I liked her more as the story continued and we explored her passions and ideologies. My complaint is, wow, you guys, we could have toned it down a whole lot with the explicit content. There's a way to do it off screen or in a far more subtle manner. Oh, and Louise surviving with a broken ankle and being drowned was crazy, but I forgive it for how sick that action sequence was. It was great. Louise is a great lens to view Joe through, and I was engrossed in all of the scenes from her perspective. Wrapping up the show from her point of view, a survivor of Joe who was doing so much better on the other side was amazing. Like the sun was finally coming through the clouds. Joe's final monologue about the world being the problem is sadly fitting, but it also suits his mental state, proving there is no redeeming him. Joe will never be satisfied, always be selfish, and definitely isn't capable of functioning in a healthy relationship. Thoughts and rankings. We did it! What a massive journey. To wrap things up, I'll be going over some thoughts and making my rankings. I'll start things off with some general critiques I couldn't fit in. The spoon feeding. I guess because it's a mainstream show, they thought people weren't paying attention because why are we pointing things out so obviously? Let me figure it out, please. You don't need to replay previous scenes all the time or spell out connecting threads to me. Honestly, most media does this and it's a pet peeve I constantly run into. The look of the show can sometimes be boring and standard. When they lock in and do something interesting, it elevates the experience a lot. The popular music in the show often feels misplaced, and I miss season 1 soundtrack. Where did that go? Songs I do think suited the scenes are mostly from season 5. The series had a lot of loose ends just abandoned. To name a few, a trooper notes Joe's number plate with suspicion in season 1, Joe leaves his mug of pee at Peach's estate, he pays Ellie off and we never hear from her again, and Thea knows his identity and crimes but survives and we never see him again. Okay, the love interests. Each of them are vastly different from one another in personality and appearance, proving Joe's lack of type and his projection of perfection onto them. Joe doesn't actually want the woman. He drops them like flies once they no longer serve him. Joe wants to be needed, for them to see him and appreciate his protection while being a doll he can idolize. Because of his mentality, I find that the love interests that suit him best narratively are Beck, Love, and Bronte, and those who don't suit him are Candace, Karen, Delilah, Natalie, Marion, and Kate. Beck suits Joe the best because of her deep insecurities, she needed saving, and Joe fit like a suffocating glove. Love was obsessed with unconditional love and family values, deeply understanding Joe's mentality and accepting him. Bronte was entranced by dark romance and the romantic idea of doing anything to protect those you love, falling into his trap. On the other hand, Candace rejected Joe and was disgusted by his cleanliness. Karen was too healthy and had actual standards. Delilah was a casual relationship. Natalie was boring and we didn't get to know her properly. Marion fell for his facade, then rejected his truth because she has actual standards too. Kate fell for his more broken facade and rejected him once she realized his true desires. Kate was also too independent, she didn't need him. I'm going to be ranking the girls now by my favorites because at the end of the day, Joe isn't compatible with anyone. He is a loser. Number 1, Karen. I know what you're thinking. Karen was in the show for like 1 episode. Why is she your favorite? Well, you're on my turf, buddy, and she was really nice. I would like to be friends with Karen, but she was smart and responsible, and that's all. Number 2, Marian. Season 5 Marian is one of the best characters, and I stand by that. She's strong and should have peace from here on, you hear me? Number 3, Kate. Season 5 Kate was sick too. She's a deeply flawed character and her crimes are unforgivable, but her progression in the story is well done. She's hardworking, strong, and responsible in the end. Seeing her stand up to Joe was satisfying. Number 4, Louise. But I thought Bronte was annoying. Well, I liked her. Get rage baited. Louise's crime was being irritating and love bombed, but once she snapped out of it, following her brave quest was compelling. I liked her friendship with Beck and her sad backstory. Also, her internal struggles were often relatable. Seeing her end the show happy and clear-headed felt rewarding. Number 5, Beck. You like Beck? Yeah, buddy. She may be a home-wrecking cheater, but I'm nostalgic for season 1. I like her flawed character, her writing, her father issues, and internal struggles. A quick side note, it is so absurd to see all of the hate Beck and Bronte get compared to Kate, who gave children. Number 6, Love. If I'd made this list a couple years ago, Love would have been number 1, and she is probably the most popular and adored one. I think the reason why Love is lower on my list is because season 5 made me root for Joe's downfall. Love wouldn't be his downfall if he had accepted her. She would have been the reward. It was a great ending because it was happy. To put him behind bars and leave him there alone after we had dealt with his nonsense for so long. It punished the bad behavior. If they didn't, it would have been sad to see all the people he's hurt never get closure and continue to be in danger. It's also a huge point of Joe's character that he didn't accept Love because he's a hypocrite who can't take accountability. He sees himself as a savior on a white horse, except he's a lone, blood-soaked peasant. Actually, that would be too kind and offensive to peasants everywhere. Love made Joe on edge when he was normally the silent one looking in on his unsuspecting prey. She stood and looked him in the eyes, said she was just like him, and he hated it. He couldn't control her, manifest the world around her, because she was an active player with high knife-wielding stats. Like the Eat the Rich killer, Joe had to kill her to save the day because she was dangerous. Oh, I got sidetracked. Number 7, Natalie. Boo, didn't care. Number 8, Candace. I really like Candace when she's trying to help Love and is being kind. It was heartbreaking when she passed, but every other moment she was so annoying. And finally, my season's rankings. Number 1, season 5. An absolute spectacle. The humor, Joe's character, the plot, everything about it is what I wanted from the show. Number 2, season 4. I really liked the thriller mystery, some great moments, and a cool use of Joe's character. Number 3, season 1. Classic stalking story that felt realistic and creepy. Number 4, season 2. Fun take on the concept with a big twist. And then number 5 is season 3, which was an absolute mess in my opinion. Overall, a fun show. I recommend it. It has plenty of flaws that I didn't even touch on, but the story is what I enjoy. Joe's character is fascinating and the journey was entertaining. It's got a special place in my youth and I'm glad to have seen it. And that's it. I think that's all I have to say for now. I had so much fun digging into this script. Ending this with 16,000 words. I can't wait to make more. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts about the show in the comments. I've seen lots of divided opinions on the seasons and a love interest, so I'm curious to see what your personal rankings are. Stay tuned and subscribe. I've got plenty more cooking. I post weekly about movies, shows, games, books, and the like. I've also got a few more videos about the show You, so I'll see you in the next one.